Meantime, Washington Post opinion writer David Ignatius is in Washington. David, thanks for joining us. What do you make of this debate here in the U.S., where several Republican governors and lawmakers they're refusing to accept refugees?
It's understandable that governors are worried about the security of residents of their states and want to make sure that security procedures are in place. But that's a matter for our immigration authorities. There are elaborate procedures to follow here. The idea of having blanket statements, we will not accept Syrians at a time when this civil war has killed more than 250,000 Syrians, when it's the greatest humanitarian crisis in many people's eyes since World War II. The idea that the United States would forbid people to seek refuge here because of our fear of terrorism is quite disturbing. Follow the procedures to vet people, yes, but blanket announcements that our doors are closed, that strikes me as very, frankly, un-American.
And David, what about some of the rhetoric? What are your thoughts on, for instance, Ted Cruz's and Donald Trump's comments that Muslims should stay in the region and that the United States should only admit refugees who are Christians?
It's troubling for many reasons. It certainly plays directly into the ISIS narrative about the intolerance of the West. But what bothers me most is that Ted Cruz, Donald Trump don't seem to realize that the greatest victims of ISIS so far have been Muslims. Far more Muslims have been killed as a result of their bombing attacks than have Christians in the West. This is a relatively recent phenomenon. What does Ted Cruz say to the 40 or so Muslim victims who were killed in Beirut on Thursday, the day before the Paris attack? It just seems to me that people have to understand that this is a brutal group that kills Muslim apostates who oppose them and Christian and Jewish unbelievers with equal savagery, and that there ought to be a unity of effort, a unity of views about this, not a separation where we say, oh, it's only Christians who we trust to be here. That misreads what's happening in the world, and I think it's also dangerous because it's polarizing.
As we've reported, Governor Christie's even saying that children under the age of 5 shouldn't be let in, and it's hard not to imagine that 3-year-old boy that is seared into the minds of the world after he was washed ashore and he drowned. You've visited these refugee camps. Can you paint a picture for us? You've written that Syrian families struggle for a measure of dignity. It's a place of ordered misery. Tell us a little bit about it.
I want your viewers to imagine coming over the crest of a hill in northern Jordan and seeing something that looks like a mirage. It's white tents for miles and miles, as far as you can see. And at first you think the light is playing tricks on you, but no, that is a camp that's got 125,000, 150,000 people in it, living in these small white tents, having come across the border as a result of the savage war that's taking place in Syria. You tour these camps, they're full of young kids. My biggest fear is that we're losing a generation in the Arab world. I hope not to extremism, but we're certainly losing them in terms of employment, education. I think Americans have to see that our future, not just in the next 6 months, year, but for decades, is going to be shaped by these events. And we have to respond to them in a compassionate way, a militant way. This ISIS has got to be stopped. This is a military problem, but if you see the human suffering, I think you look at this more as a human being, in a less fearful, more compassionate way.
And David, what is your view of the Obama administration's strategy when it comes to ISIS? Because we heard a very forceful President Obama yesterday defend his strategy.
President Obama now, I think, is doing most of the right things. I think he's been very late to come to a strong policy here, looking at the situation in Syria that created the ISIS threat. It's hard to imagine that things could be have been worse with another policy. I've been writing for 3 years that I thought the United States needed to try to fill the vacuum in Syria so that the extremists didn't take root. I do believe that was a mistake, but I think now President Obama is trying to work with our allies trying to use military power effectively. Certainly in terms of air power, we're doing a lot already. I think it's good that we now have people who on the ground are going to support fighters inside Syria who can go at ISIS, go at their capital in Raqqa, in northeast Syria directly on the ground. It won't happen overnight. Probably won't happen until next spring. But I think we're moving toward doing the right things. It's a final point. In any situation after a great tragedy, as Americans understand, I think, looking back at 9/11, there's a danger of overreaction, of doing things that are reactions of the moment, emotional reactions that are difficult to sustain. And I really hope the French, after this tragedy in Paris, will be careful to avoid that. In that sense, I think, although I'd like to see President Obama take a stronger line on some things, I think trying to be sensible, trying not to overreact, trying to make sure that you can keep doing 5 years from now what you start today is the right way to think about this.
All right, David Ignatius, Washington Post opinion writer, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much.